This is an introduction to placement allocation and clinical tutors on the Royal Holloway Doctorate in Clinical Psychology program. So I'm going to go through the clinical tutor team and our tasks, and then briefly talk about the placement allocation and planning. And for further information on these, please refer to the website for the Royal Holloway DClin Psy program. This is our current clinical tutor team. So we have a clinical director, and then for each year we have an allocated clinical tutor team, one or two clinical tutors. And we also have a placement administrator who manages all the placement documentation, and that's the person you need to return all placement contracts and mid-placement and end-of-placement review documents. We also have 12 associate clinical tutors who conduct some of the mid-placement review visits, who are associated with the course. So this is just an overview of the structure, and I suppose what's important to know about this is that the clinical director is the line manager for all the trainees, but that line management is devolved into the clinical tutor team, who the trainees directly report to. And we partly report to the course or program executive, as well as the head of department and to the board of examiners. And we also work closely with the UEL and UCL clinical tutor teams. So you can approach us about everything related to placement, such as supervision or problems on placement or with supervision. Any personal issues you might be talking to your personal tutor about, but if they are impacting on placement, it is important to come and talk to us about it. Serious incidents on placement, special needs, you might need some adjustments for placements, queries around associate clinical tutors who we act as a point of contact with, and also what's going well, as well as coming and talking to us about your interests and any requirements in terms of fulfilling your competencies, so we can take those into account in planning for your placements. So the placements are spread across a very large area, which basically covers all of the North Thames, from sort of all the way from east to west. And it's over 30 NHS trusts, so a large amount of cultural mix, different communities, and there are also a number of national and specialist centres, such as the Broadmoor, Tavistock, Great Ormond Street, and also some charitable and third sector placements are available. So we allocate either 6 or 12 months placements. Usually for the first year it's usually a 12-month placement, sometimes 2 6-month placements. For second year there will be 2 6-month placements, and for third year it's either a 12-month placement or 2 6-month placements, depending on the kind of placements that you wish to pursue and are allocated, and the range of experience that you want for third year. And you'll find out about placements in March and September, and we want to do that 4 to 6 weeks before the placement begins, which they do in April and October. And the reason why sometimes trainees wonder why we might take a bit of time in terms of letting them know after placements have been allocated is because we want to confirm those placements with supervisors before we let you know. And this really is to minimize in the instances where a trainee is allocated and then the placement falls through and there's disappointment around this. So that can still happen, but we're trying to minimize that happening, the chances of that happening. So the placements are managed through placement lists, which are spread across the 3 courses, Royal Holloway, UCL and UEL. And there's an allocated person who manages each of these lists. And they are basically, for example, for the neuro list, it will be all the neuropsychology placements available that are being offered in the North Thames area. We meet with the other courses separately for each year group to allocate the placements from these lists. And before that, each course would have contacted the placement coordinators in each trust for what placements they have available for that year. So when allocating, we firstly consider special needs such as health and care responsibilities. We think about your competencies, your training needs, what kinds of client groups and models, and where the gaps are. We look at travel time and try and minimize that, although this can be very difficult, especially when there are specific requirements for services that are in quite short supply. And of course we want to know about your aspirations and what you are hoping to do after training. And of course we also consider service needs and NHS priorities. So we will contact you before each allocation to get some of this information, which will inform the allocation. And there is also a mid-training competency review at the middle of your training in January of the 2nd year, where you will meet with one of the clinical tutor team to look through your competencies and to look where you need more experiences, in what areas, and this will then inform the allocation of your last 3 placements. So when you are allocated, you will get an allocation letter which will outline your placement. Your supervisor receives a short summary paragraph of your academic record and clinical experience, and also for when you've had previous placement, they will get the previous end of placement review targets that you have set at the end of your review, and these can then be considered on this placement. And we also strongly encourage you to share your CV with your supervisor and discuss training needs, as well as any important reading around the placement. And there's a very important agreement across the 3 courses, which is that trainees must not contact supervisors directly to set up placements. And this is works on a system of trust, really, so that we do not get into a first come first serve system, and essentially the allocation process then does not work and will unfairly privilege certain people over others. If you are keen on a certain kind of placement, we strongly recommend that you come and talk to us about it, and talk to us about why you are particularly interested in that placement, and then we can take that to the allocation meetings and do our best to try and get you that placement or an equivalent placement. And we can do that best if we know what it is about the placement that you are particularly looking for. So for relevant documents and more information, I'd like to direct you to the Royal Holloway website, and the placement section has more information on the allocation process. And here are some of the relevant documents that I would ask you to familiarize yourself with. These are all on the Royal Holloway DClinSci program website as well, as are these. And you also need to, when you start in placement, to in addition to the more national policies and guidelines, you need to familiarize yourself with the service policies, as well as your placement planning grid, which you will be given at the start of placement with your placement letter.